All right. We apologize for the delay, but welcome to episode 115, I believe, of Trek Live. In this week's episode, Bill and I were going to be talking about the beloved Enterprise character, Charles Trip Tucker III. How you doing this morning, Bill? And what issues are we having if people can't?
You can't see my ugly mug, which might be a benefit to some folks out there. No, I'm hoping to get that working as kind of we go. Hopefully, my appearance I'll make an appearance physically or visually.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of problems with Discord. So when they happen, they usually take some time to figure out. So we're at least coming. This is kind of the territory we kind of enter in when we're doing a live show. So we just got to roll with the punches. Yes. We're pretty good at that. I think we should just get started. Bill, how's your rewatch going?
My rewatch is on stationary. It is not. It has not moved much since I last appeared. I was on shore leave for quite a while, and with the attention on Picard, a lot of the free time I've had, where I would normally maybe watch a new episode in quotes for the rewatch. I've kind of gone back and rewatched Picard episodes 1 or 2. So I'm still sitting at. I watched The Defector last, so I have The Hunted coming up. I'm hoping to do that soon. But I've definitely been living in the Star Trek Picard space for the most part. So, what about you?
I think I'm back to my 2 episodes a week progress. Nice. Last week I did Metamorphosis and Journey to Babel. This week was Friday's Child and The Deadly Years.
Interesting pair of episodes.
Yeah. I'm not sure what to. I don't know. There's not a lot to report with those episodes. I think last week's there was a kind of a good mix of good and bad, but I think this week is more middle of the road. I will just say that. I think it's kind of fun to see 1960s makeup with making people look older. It's kind of fun to see that. That's kind of a trope we've kind of seen in Star Trek before. We've seen them go younger, we've seen them go older, we've seen them, do everything.
Indeed.
So it feels like Trek, just very middle of the road.
That's exactly what I would say too. I mean, those 2 episodes are about as middle of the road as you can get. I don't dislike either of them.
Yeah.
I don't love either of them.
Yeah.
They both have their merits. I think Friday's Child is. It's got some really good Dr. McCoy stuff. It's pretty campy. There's really very, very 60s fight scenes in it. Very 60s, very TOS, like aliens, like the big tall guys.
Yeah.
With the tall hats. Like there's some silliness in that one, but there's some good stuff too. There's some good dialogue with the trio and Planet.
And there, we talk about? No, we talked about Vasquez Rock on core setting. I think that looked like Vasquez Rock, but I could be wrong.
Definitely. It definitely is. Yeah. So it's you gotta love it when TOS goes on location.
Yep.
Usually the Vasquez Rocks, more than half the time, I would say.
Yeah.
That definitely gives those episodes, when they do it, a sense of realism and like a wide openness.
Yeah.
There's some cool soundstage planets, that's for sure, that work pretty well. I actually love the one in Metamorphosis. I think the planet looks really cool in that episode. Like they do some really cool weird perspective shots that make it look really deep and long. And so, but those are kind of hit and miss for me, as well, as far as like how well they've aged and how well they hold up. But the outdoor location stuff is always great.
Yeah.
We have Rob in the chat.
Welcome,
Rob.
Rob.
Love it when Rob stops by.
Yeah.
He says he's massively stalled with his TOS watch through. Picard has taken over his Trek watching schedule, which Yeah, sheer effing hubris of Picard dominating his Trek watching. Yes,
Yes.
I agree. New Star Trek, new show. Like I remember that with Discovery when Discovery started. It kind of paused my rewatch as well. So that's easy to happen.
Yeah. All right. I think we should get into the topic at hand. Kind of moving away from our rewatch. I think this kind of topic came up because we hadn't done a character discussion or highlight or whatever you want to call it, specifically on, I think, Enterprise. I think we've done a few from different series, TNG and Voyager, I think, maybe. Or Discovery, I don't know, but it's nice to kind of keep expanding, and I feel like we haven't talked about some Enterprise stuff in a while, so I'm kind of excited to dive into this character.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm always happy to talk Enterprise, and you're right, it's been a while since neither one of us is kind of in it right now. When you were rewatching it, when I was rewatching it, it tended to make its way onto our show.
Yeah.
Sort of naturally a little bit more, and we've both been out of that space for quite a while, so we haven't had like an Enterprise specific conversation in quite a while. So I'm looking forward to getting into that, and if we're gonna do a character spotlight from Enterprise, Trip is, I think, a pretty natural place to go first. Yeah. Pretty typically cited as like the standout character. I may or may not I mean, I of course I love Trip, but I'm always kind of torn. I love the kind of like TOS. I love the trio. So that's one of those like really difficult gun to my head, phaser to my head questions, like picking favorite Enterprise character. It's a tough one for me, but Trip is definitely very much in the conversation. So I feel good about having our first character spotlight from Enterprise be Trip. Rob says he had to meet Connor Trunier and Dominic Keating, who plays Malcolm Reed at DST last October. Very cool. Connor Trunier is going to be the subject of, like, specifically his performance is you can't avoid that. We got to talk about the performance if we're going to talk about the character. So
we'll be putting everything under the microscope and talking about everything. Yeah.
So what is I guess the question I would kind of pose to you first is, how do you feel about is it as difficult a question for you, or is it clearly Trip? Is it clearly somebody else? Like if somebody said to you, who's your favorite character in Enterprise? Is it quick instinct, yes, it's Trip, or is it?
Yeah. It's clearly. I don't have the reservation or anything like that. Nope. It's clear as mud. It's Trip. I think. I mean, a lot goes into it. We'll get into. But what about you? Is favorite character? Or?
I struggle a lot. I could easily swing back and forth between Trip and T'Pol. I think with Archer right there too. Mm-hmm. Rob says his is not Trip, so I feel like I know Rob, but for the benefit of everybody,
don't be afraid.
Enterprise character. But I for the majority of my time watching Enterprise, going back to when it aired, I would have said Trip. And I still might, but T'Pol, every time I kind of go back to that show, kind of edges her way up and gets more and more on like equal footing with T'Pol or with Trip. So, but what I would say is I think what makes Trip so successful in a nutshell for me is I think he is the kind of embodiment he's the most successful embodiment of the premise of the show through a character. Like I think he represents what they were going for with going back and doing the prequel, but boots on the ground, mud on the shoes,
excited to get out and explore,
excited to be out there, all of those things that they were hoping to accomplish with the premise of Enterprise, all the sort of energy they were hoping to like inject into Star Trek as a whole, most of it came through Trip, which I think is why it's easy to kind of gravitate towards that character. He is representative of the show, even more so than like Archer, the head of the show, the captain. I think his role as the head of the ship, the captain of the ship, sort of forces him into more traditional, groundwork. Like it kind of funnels him into a more traditional space for those kinds of characters, where Trip gets, because he's lower on the tier, he's second in command, third in command, third in command.
Third.
He's certainly in the chain of command, and he's in a traditional position for Star Trek. But because he's not captain, he gets to do things and say things and be a kind of guy that stands out a little bit more as a distinctive thing in the ensemble of Star Trek characters.
Yeah, and I think that kind of makes him relatable in the fact that, I feel like all of us in the audience and watching, we are pretty eager to get out into space and explore too. Sure. So there's some relatability to it as well, and then his loyalty too. It's just again, it's, I don't know, it's inspiring, I guess, kind of the loyalty and how hard he works. But I also think that he's also a typical engineer of that era. Like, I feel like he's really Scotty-esque in that the captain is always asking, to the moon and then some, and he's always got to make it work. And I don't know. I feel like he's really similar to Scotty in a lot of ways. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, like his like Scotty, you get the sense that he's like getting his hands dirty and like doing the engineering.
Yeah.
Where I feel like B'Elanna Torres for sure has that too. But Geordi, as much as I love Geordi, a lot of the time he feels a little bit more like an administrator in engineering.
Yeah.
Like less like getting his hands dirty and doing the nitty gritty dirty work. He's kind of the manager on the scene with like a whole crew of engineers going around doing the stuff.
Yeah.
And that makes sense on that ship. It's a huge ship. It's the flagship, massive crew. But on the Enterprise, X-1 in the 21st century, it makes sense. It's a smaller crew. Everything's more tight knit. Nothing works quite as well. There's always more issues.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think earlier in the timeline, the engineers have this vibe of kind of rusty,
it's a dirtier job, right?
Yeah.
Once we get to the D, it's a really refined process where it's not as
we tapping LCARs.
Yeah, hands on.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think the difference between like the Kirk and Scotty dynamic and the Archer and Trip dynamic is the friendship and the loyalty that the captain has with the engineer, like the connection, the personal connection, which I'm sure we'll talk about more.
Yeah.
When Archer's needing more out of Trip and engineering and needs a little bit more, he needs more power, like in the most cliche Star Trek kind of way. There's that little added juice to it because what that friendship is, and when Archer's asking Trip, to do a little more, to get a little more out of the ship, like there's more emotionally charged stuff in there because of the relationship, personal relationship between the two people.
Yeah, I totally agree. And another thing that I like about Trip's character, you can just the way the character is written and the way he treats, I feel like he's so passionate and takes pride in his in engineering. So I think that's also kind of inspiring to, like, at least in my job, to
right.
But yeah,
he loves what he does. He's doing the one thing that he could be doing.
Yeah.
Which is always cool to see.
Yeah.
And it's always kind of for sure. That's a good trait. Mm-hmm. And I do think the other thing that you said that really stuck out to me is the loyalty.
Oh yeah.
Thing, particularly
talk about that for a little bit.
To Archer specifically, I think one of the things in Star Trek's DNA that kind of makes it special and kind of connects all these shows together and makes it one big thing is the way Star Trek kind of portrays friendship, and the family bond, making a family wherever you go, and that idea is kind of integral to all these shows. It's what connects them all, and the Archer Trip friendship is like a classic version of that. I think it fits right in with Kirk's relationships with Spock and McCoy, and it's very much a throwback to the way those friendships were portrayed in TOS. So I think there's something very comforting about that too, and that loyalty that Trip has for Archer is is really kind of in the DNA of Enterprise as a show. I think that's one of the best things about that show.
I totally agree, and I don't think the loyalty just stops with I almost said Picard, just Picard in my mind, but Archer. I feel like it's with T'Pol, with his bromance with
Reed.
Yeah, Malcolm Reed, and it's just he just oozes loyalty. No, it's not just
It's with the ship too.
Yeah, especially with the ship too. Yeah. Yep.
Yep. Definitely. Yep.
Yes.
The other thing, and kind of doubling back to Rob here, Rob says his favorite is he loves Dr. Phlox, but he sees why Trip is so popular, loyal, lovable, roguish. He has all those tendencies that we find in the most successful Star Trek characters, I think. And we have some conversation about the end of that character, which we're definitely
I
going
think
to
wait a little bit longer before we get fired up.
Definitely eager to talk about that. That's you can't talk about Trip and not talk about that stuff. The other thing that I think makes Trip special and elevates him into kind of elite status with Star Trek characters for me is the fact that he has a really clear and distinctive arc. The character changes over time.
Yep. Very much so.
His views on the role of humanity in space, the relationship he has with T'Pol is like the most literal and like the actual change that you see, but it more broadly, it's his view on the Vulcans, and it's all done through his evolving relationship with T'Pol. I love that about him. He starts as a pretty rigid, in his views.
We don't need any help.
We don't need any help, kind of like Archer does too.
Yeah.
Archer goes through a lot of the same changes, but has a different path to his getting to where he ends up. But I think that change, and I've said this before, I think if you boil Enterprise all the way down, I think what it really is doing, the best thing that it does is it sells this change in, like at the beginning of Broken Bow, like you just said, we don't need any help. Humanity has this adversarial relationship with the Vulcans, and in order to get to where humanity needs to end up, building the Federation and being this like cornerstone in this, alliance that gets us to this better place as a species and as a galaxy, we need to get over these things. And watching Archer and Trip specifically build a relationship with T'Pol, and T'Pol building a relationship with them, represents what this show is all about. Like, it's getting us there. It's the process we need to get there.
Yeah.
And because Trip is so integral into that process, that change is really a building block to making that character as successful as he is. And I think that's why he kind of stands out. When people talk about Enterprise, they talk about Trip.
Yeah, because they really are that is the foundation, the relationship between the Vulcans and the humans that we see in Enterprise on into TOS with Spock on the bridge, and Next Generation with Vulcan crewmen. It's definitely a building block, and then with Voyager too, it is definitely a building block. So I think that they did a really good job of capitalizing on that, like you said.
Yeah, if we can't get to a place where we can work with the Vulcans, we're not getting anywhere. Like, there's no path forward in any way.
Yeah.
To getting to where humanity in TOS and in TNG and beyond.
Yeah.
If we can't, get to a place where we're cohesively working with the Vulcans and not working against them.
Yeah.
And that's displayed, and we get there. We see that journey through Archer, T'Pol, and Trip's evolving, relationship with each other as a group of three people. So
Oops.
That's kind of my dissertation on Enterprise's success as a whole. But Trip is such a big part of that, and Trip's arc and his change is I think the best thing about his character, for my money. That, along with his, like I said, I think his the way that he kind of the embodiment of the premise of the show. I think those are kind of the two legs that the character kind of stands on. Those are the two things that really prop him up.
Rob mentions, I like the old world charm. It reminds me of Dr. McCoy in that respect. Yeah, I totally agree, Rob. It's also a little bit comforting because he does feel like an everyday type of guy. Like, he doesn't feel like this, I don't know, he just feels like an everyday guy that you can really relate to, and not just the old world charm, but he's just really relatable in that way. So.
Yeah, he is. He's that's definitely a successful thing about the character too, and I think it was a difficult thing to navigate. I think they clearly went into the show and started developing this character, with the Southern accent,
yeah,
kind of throwback, a little bit more curmudgeon at times, a little bit speaks his, wears his emotions on his sleeve.
Yep.
There's a danger to going down that path and kind of aping Dr. McCoy too much.
Yes.
And I think there are times, even at the very, very beginning of the show, like in those first handful of episodes, where maybe they do take it a step too far, and he feels a little too Dr. McCoy-esque. But I think as his performance evolves and as the writing of the show gains confidence and they kind of figure the character out, and the character has experiences that make him distinct from Dr. McCoy, as we get to know him and he goes through trials and tribulations through the show, he clearly breaks his own way. Like, he's not an aping of Dr. McCoy at all, in my mind. Just, the only similarity to Dr. McCoy is that, he's from the southern part of the United States and speaks with a certain accent, and he's an emotional guy. Like, that's kind of where it ends. Like, there's nothing else similar about the character beyond those two. They're very, very basic things. And we could find a whole lot of emotional Southern men if we tried. That's not a problem at all to me. So I think that was a challenge that the show had to deal with, and I think they successfully did very quickly. I think by just a handful of episodes in, I'm not thinking about Dr. McCoy watching Trip at all.
No.
Yeah. Rob asks us.
Yeah.
Favorite Trip episode, and I think that's another thing. I think a lot of the episodes that are, standouts for that show are heavily featuring Trip. I think he's very involved in some of the best episodes. Rob mentions Cogenitor, which is a major highlight for me. It's a great one, and I think because he's an emotional guy, a lot of the episodes that tug at the heartstrings and have that emotional component are Trip episodes. Cogenitor is certainly one of them.
Shut Up Pod 1.
What else comes to mind for you?
Shut Up Pod 1 is another one that I think it's a pretty good performance. Both actors there. But yeah, that's another one that comes to mind. But again, a lot of he also has some great moments that are just not featured in a Trip specific episode, if you want to call it.
Yes.
Just moments. It might be a comment here or banter, between the big three of Enterprise. I think it's hard to kind of nail down maybe one or two episodes or moments with such a rich character. So
I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you: do any come to mind specifically? Like, are there scenes that pop into They could be, even if they are from like a Trip episode. Like, are there things that, like, when you think about Trip, are there scenes that come into your head as like that's why he stands out to me? Things like I'm definitely putting you on the spot. We didn't talk about pulling specific things out, but
I'm trying to think.
I'll throw one to you real quick. Why you think like one that always kind of comes to mind for me is in an episode that I'm not even. It's an early episode, season 1. It's called Fusion. They meet these emotional Vulcans who, one of them takes an interest in T'Pol and kind of tries to pull T'Pol that way, embracing emotion over logic. But there's another Vulcan character who Trip has some interactions with. And this Vulcan character's father is dying, and the father's trying to reach out and have like a connection again, trying to reestablish a connection. And the emotional Vulcan doesn't want to. Like, he's kind of closed the door. He has no desire to go down that road. And Trip has this conversation with him where Trip's talking about regret and going to like an 8th grade dance and like still feeling regret about not asking his crush to dance with him at that dance because he was afraid and still feels it. And it's a simple scene. There's like nothing special about it. It's not in a particularly good episode. It's a heavy-handed, it's a heavy-handed storyline. Like all the stuff around it is, not spectacular in any way. But Trip's part of it, and Connor Trinneer's performance really works, and it makes the character endearing. And that, to me, like, that's an example of, it doesn't have to be a Trip episode for him to like deliver the goods. Like he probably does the best thing in that episode, even though he's very much a background part of it.
Yeah. I don't have one. I'm trying to think, and I don't have one. I think I don't even want to try because I don't have one.
Yeah, there's so many, like, it's a collage that it's there's tons. But other things like Similitude, obviously, that's my favorite episode of Enterprise. That's not even really much Trip. It's a different character for the most part in that episode. It's this clone who has his own set of experiences and his own challenges. But as far as like Connor Trinneer's performance in the show, I think that's a real standout. And we learn a lot about Trip through that episode. I also think of this scene in towards the back end of season three. Season 3, there's a whole nother emotional component. I mean, he's dealing with the loss of his sister. He's got grief issues and anger issues, and he's got a lot he's trying to grapple with. And he has this breakdown with Paul towards the end in an episode called The Forgotten. He's dealing with the loss of one of the engineers on his crew, and Archer tells him to write a letter home to his mother, to the engineer's mother. And he's struggling with that. He's trying to do that at the same time as he's trying to keep the ship together. Like this is at the point of the season where the ship is like falling apart at the seams. Just got the crap beat out of it by the Xindi, and he has this moment with the Paul where he breaks down and he cries. And I remember distinctly, I distinctly remember feeling at the time watching it like that's unusual to see a Star Trek character just like lose it. Like you don't in that period of Star Trek, like TNG, DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, especially like our Starfleet characters, you typically won't see them like lose control and just kind of slip. And that felt really raw and real because it was distinctive, and the performance was obviously great, but just it was jarring in that we were watching, the type of character that typically wouldn't slip and show that side of themselves. So there those kinds of things really stand out. The breadth of emotion that we get out of that character is unique too.
Well, I think he has such range, right? Because he's been like the comic relief for a little bit, and then he goes through this really dramatic and emotional stage. So you just get this range that I think that's what makes a really good character. It's not just there are some specific, but I think to me a good character is it can definitely, do some comedy things, do some action hero things, do some, emotional things, everything.
We talk a lot about Rick Berman era Star Trek, especially being the Swiss Army knife and playing with genre and doing all kinds of things. Being different every week, tonally, thematically, from a genre standpoint. And Trip is one of the characters that can live in pretty much any...
A Swiss Army knife character.
Yes, the character, controversial episode that not a lot of people love, but unexpected. He can do a comedy where he gets pregnant. And then he can be on a horse in North Star in a Western. And he can cry in the There's such a range of use for him. You never feel like, I imagine the writers never felt like, we're going down a road in an episode here, we're going into like a space or a genre or a theme or whatever, and Trip just doesn't fit here. Like, we can't find a way for that character. Like, I don't imagine that ever really happened. Trip can work kind of anywhere, which is, like you said, the sign of a really strong character that was built well and has an actor at its center who can do it, who can sell anything, and can make the character make sense in any situation.
Yeah. And I think another thing too, just maybe going back to the performance, Connor Trinneer as an actor, I feel like from day one, he's Trip Tucker. Like, I feel like there's some characters in Star Trek that take a little bit, to warm up or, get their feet under them. But this, like, from day one, I think felt like Trip Tucker. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's great right off the bat. Like I said at the very beginning, I think there was writing things that I think they kind of were trying to figure out how far they could take the character without feeling too much like a McCoy trying to ape that a little too much. But that's on the writing standpoint. I think Connor Tripp's performance is confident and full of life from the beginning, and it's consistent all the way through it. Like I feel like his arc never feels like it never feels like, okay, this is the episode where he kind of clicks. Like he clicks in Broken Bow. He's right away.
Yep.
And any change you see in the character feels natural.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's changing as the mission goes on. The character's getting more confident and shifting his views. It never feels like the actor like made a turn and changed. Mm-hmm. Which is, and again, I think a sign of a really good performance, which he clearly gives. Rob says no love for Precious Cargo, then, which is of note. maybe the weakest episode of Enterprise also features
Trip specific.
Trip is a Trip specific episode, which that's bound to happen too.
Yeah. I think we should just dive into the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
The death. Yes. Yep.
I
think we kind of talked about this in Death and Trek episode.
Yeah. Talking about These Are the Voyages specifically.
Yeah.
But you got to. I mean, we got to cover our.
Yeah. Bill, just run through your thoughts. Basic thoughts.
My big. I think the biggest issue with it to me is I think it's arbitrary and it feels like it's kind of. Rob says it best. It seemed like a bit of a waste. I think that's probably the way to go. I feel like they were trying to have a big emotional thing happen, and I think the easy thing, like, they kind of, I'm going to use the word lazy. I wasn't in the writer's room. I don't know how lazy, but it feels lazy to take the road of, well, let's just take the most popular character and off if we want to get the audience to be emotional and get an emotional reaction out of people. It didn't feel earned at all, and I think a lot of the frustration for me also comes from the premise of that episode, which isn't even so much about, like, people get angry and kind of hung up on it's a holodeck, it's TNG kind of edging their way into the show, and that feels unnatural. And I agree with all that too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not into that myself either. But my biggest issue with the episode is the time jump, that it ends with Demons and Terra Prime, where Trip and T'Pol are in this emotional space, having lost that baby and trying to find a path forward, and on one hand feeling like there's no hope, but on the other hand there is hope, because they could do that. They know they could do that now, and that there is a path forward for them if they want to take it. But then this next episode comes, the last episode, it jumps ahead 10 years, and it very kind of arbitrarily tells you, well, none of that happened. Like it never worked out, and the relationship kind of hit a brick wall and stopped. Like I feel like there's an emotionally unsatisfying thing that's really hard to get over there. It's just it feels disconnected from where season 4 was kind of taking us up to that point, and that is my biggest problem with that episode as a whole. And then you combine that with, we spend the entire kind of episode doing that and being emotionally unsatisfying with his relationship with Paul, that has been such a focus on that character for the last 2 seasons, and then you kill him at the end, which is like kicking a body while it's down. It just not a good look for me. So I don't find that satisfying at all. Probably one of the biggest missteps that they ever had. And Rob mentions that in the novels they kind of corrected it by revealing his death was kind of faked, and he joined Section 31 and a discovered agent who's doing this, doing that. I haven't read the books, sadly, so I don't know all the details, but that's essentially the premise of Trip's arc in those novels, as I understand it. But what about you, Dan? Like, do you agree with that? Like, do you have?
Yeah, I want to make a few things clear. I think you're right. It's very jarring. The whole episode in itself is a complete 180 from what we just seen. The week or two before. However, I wasn't watching when it first aired, but a complete 180 from week to week. It's so jarring. You mentioned it, the time jump, the character relationships, complete 180. And then just to end it with that, the thing that I want to make clear is I'm okay with Death and Trek, because
sure,
it's known that Starfleet is a dangerous profession. This is out in space, pushing the envelope. I'm okay with it when it's done well and it's sanctioned and it feels right, but to do that right at the end, and I think it really put a lot of, I think that's where the negative things negative, how do I say this? The negative views on Enterprise stem from that single episode, and I think Voyager falls similarly into that kind of category as well. Is where you have this really jarring, very out of left field death, and I think it kind of put a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of fans, and I think that Enterprise suffered from that. So I think it's not just the death of the character; it's how people perceive the show now, and I think it's definitely come around. I think a lot of people like Enterprise now, but it's very frustrating how they handled not just the death but everything else, and then you see the ripples, the effect of the show.
No, I think that's right. I think the end of Enterprise, that last episode, the sad part about it is I think it does hurt. I think it hampers the show in the minds of many people. I think it becomes a hurdle that the show has to deal with now. Like there are people who I'm pretty sure kind of struggle with the show, not so much for maybe not the body of the show, but they know how it ends and they find that so unsatisfying that it sort of ripples its way all the way through the back end of it.
Yeah,
the front that goes through. So it's a problem for the show that
it's got baggage.
It has baggage. It becomes part of the DNA of the show. It's think about when they think of Enterprise. Oh man, that last episode was so terrible. I hated the way it ended. It's a shame. It's definitely a shame. I also think the other problem with the way that the death is handled is I think it's there's a good way to do anything. Like I'm gonna say this, but I'm not saying that by its nature, like because they took this route, it was a disaster waiting to happen. Like there's a way to do this.
Yeah.
But I also think that having him die as a result of like just the mechanics of how it happens, like these aliens the ship and take Archer and like prisoner, like they've been in worse scrapes before. Like it's such a they've dealt with these kinds of things so many times in the past that it feels so like run of the mill and just gonna be this. Like I don't. There was a way to do it. If I think they could have ended the show with having Trip like sacrifice himself or
make it more grand, not just the everyday. An alien pulls it.
Aliens boarded the ship, and he had to go blow up a conduit that he's standing next to take out these aliens.
Yeah,
to save Archer. Like that. It just feels too run of the mill, and just this time.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work out. Like that's the only thing Trip could have done to save the ship. Like and save his friend. I like the fact that he like we just talked about earlier, like the loyalty to Archer. He does it because he wants to save Archer.
Yeah,
that works. That's consistent with his character. He would lay his life down for Archer. We all know that. We know that early on. But it's the mechanics of how we get there. I don't think it's satisfying on any level. It's the situation. It's the way he does it. It's where it happens in the show. It's a lot of issues with it.
Yes, a lot of issues. And
where do you come down on? I know we've definitely. I don't want to cut you off. I know you were going to.
No, go ahead.
I was going to. We've definitely talked about this before, but I feel like we have to kind of at least address it. What about his relationship with T'Pol? Like, is that where does that fit in the line? We had an episode about romances like 2 years ago, and I remember vaguely what we kind of landed on, but like, where does that fit in with the kind of ensemble of Star Trek, romances? Whether it's Worf and Dax or Riker and Troy, like Trip and T'Pol is one of them now, and Paris and B'Elanna. Like, is it one of the good ones? Is it a mixed bag? Like, what do you think?
Let's see. This might be a kind of a topic for a bigger a topic for a longer conversation. But you guys know I'm a shipper. I definitely I think it was I love the slow burn. And I feel like we see that a lot in Trek. There's almost every series, has the slow burn of this building of a relationship. And I'm worried that we'll lose that because I feel like in today's society, there's a lot of instant gratification, and I think I would much rather stay away from that because to me, that's unrealistic. I think in life, relationships are slow burns, not just romantic relationships, but friendship relationships, any type of relationships is a slow burn. So I think it should stay a slow burn. That being said, trying to reel back to Trip and T'Pol, I really like it. I like the kind of opposites attract type of thing they're going for here, kind of. But also, it also makes sense that I could see them together. I think I like the relationships that really stem from friendships. I think that's kind of where that kind of stemmed from, at least in their case, was friendships. I mean, there's some, decon, activities that happened that could have sparked that. But I think taking that whole thing away, I think it stems from friendship, and I think that makes for good TV and good relationships. So
definitely, I agree. First of all, great point about one of the benefits of having 26 episodes, 22 episode seasons, a long run of the show like these old Star Trek shows had, was they had the benefit to be able to do that. The way they built Tom and B'Elanna up, the way they built Trip and T'Pol up. There are things like in season 1 that, whether it was intentional or not, I don't think they were planning to have a relationship. I think they were toying with Archer and T'Pol, and they were even toying there. But there are things that, well before they had planned to do that, I think build toward what ultimately happens. And the slow burn it makes it more satisfying, for sure.
Yes.
So 100% agree there, but I also think the relationship makes sense because there are things there are similarities, there are differences. Like, I think both of them have things that the other sort of needs, can learn from, benefits from. Like, T'Pol is sort of intrigued by human emotion and humanity, and Trip window into that, and it's a place for her to be able to explore those things without no judgment, and it's a safe space for her to do those things. Trip is such an emotional guy. He needs a balance of
logic.
That's clear. Like, those two are yin and yang in that way, but they also share that sense of loyalty to Archer. Like, they're both very loyal people. Obviously common experience, and like little things. Like, I remember early on in Breaking the Ice, early episode where T'Pol's being called back to Vulcan because she's betrothed and she's got to get married, and she kind of puts it off. But through this convoluted series of events, like, Trip finds out about it, reads a letter that he shouldn't have read, but T'Pol like confides in him and talks to him. Like, early on, you're right, there are building blocks toward a friendship. T'Pol shares things with Trip that she might not otherwise share with other people.
Yeah,
that happens very early in the series. So there are these things that happen that I think chart a course toward getting where we get with those two characters. So
they
totally agree with the slow burn, and I think it makes sense. Like, on those basic be together, and we're just going to throw them there. Like, there is a sense to it.
Yeah, they definitely complement each other, like you said, really well. I think Ian said something.
He did. Well, he agrees, of course, that he wished to kill him.
Yeah.
Also likes the way that they brought him back in the novels. And there's some conversation about Trip and T'Pol's romance, the relationship.
Yeah.
Ian's a fan. Rob agrees. He loves how she comes around to Trip, T'Pol, much like Tom and B'Elanna. B'Elanna and T'Pol both really don't like Tom or Trip at first. Like, there is a degree of like adversarial that starts, and a lot of times that's what happens, right? Like, that there is, like you said, the way sometimes relationships are built on TV, like this quick instant, like you bump into somebody on the street, and, yep, there we go, that's it adds up. That's not usually the way it happens.
No.
It's typically something more along the lines of, at least in Star Trek.
Yeah, it's a slow burn. I mean, name all the slow burns. You got Picard and Bev. You got Riker and Troy. You got almost every.
And Tom, Worf and Dax. You have Odo and Kira. There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely the way that Star Trek seems to be the most comfortable building these kinds of things. So I think to kind of sum it up, I think everybody in this room, Ian, Rob, you, me, seems to be in agreement that Trip is a very successful character. Perhaps the strongest character. It's something we let off with, Ian, before you got here. You asked, and Rob said, Dr. Phlox, who is your favorite Enterprise character? Is it Trip? Is it somebody else? Is Trip in the conversation? Is it close? If he's not your favorite, is he your clear-cut favorite? Let us know where he kind of falls on your list of Enterprise characters, I guess.
By far and away, it's Trip. I don't remember trying to think back to our this or that, or not this or that, but guess each other's character rankings. Mm-hmm. I don't know if he was in my top 5. I don't know. He's definitely up there.
He might have been. He was in there. I think he might have been
7 or 6,
5,
or
he's honorable mention.
Yeah, he's definitely up there as all time. I think. Favorites.
He is. He's definitely one of my all-time favorites. Ian says that Trip is his favorite, and that's certainly. I think if you polled, if I did one of my Twitter polls, I could do Archer, Trip, DePaul, or other. I suspect Trip would probably come out on top of that by a respectable margin. Mm-hmm. Phlox gets some love. I know there's some Gotham Reed fans out there.
Yep.
Certainly a lot of love for DePaul and Archer.
Yes, for sure.
But I think if you put a phaser to people's head and say, pick one, who's your character from Enterprise, I think Trip is often the choice for people. And I think we articulated why. I think we covered, like I said, his connection to the premise of the show is sort of being the embodiment of the prequel idea. Mm-hmm. The arc of his relationship with the Vulcans and his humanity's role in the like he's a representative. He's representative of the show, of the premise of the show. It really does kind of carry a lot of water for what Enterprise is trying to do. Yeah. Along with the other two at the top of the show, but mm-hmm. Trip really is successful in pretty much every way. Yeah. And I think it helps too that a lot of when people think of the best episodes of Enterprise, Trip tends to feature heavily in a lot of them.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah, that's been this week's episode. Any Star Trek content you'd like to mention?
It's kind of back to a lot of podcasts, like when Discovery's on the air. A lot of reviews of Picard. A lot of conversations about Picard. Trying to double back. What did I listen to?
I will while Bill's getting a few. I will mention a few. Penske File dropped a kind of discussion piece, little article thing, blog post about the writing with that pertains to Picard and the Kelvin timeline. So that was kind of some Star Trek content that got me thinking a little bit differently. And then mentioning course heading. That was kind of my transition into mentioning our new podcast just dedicated to new Trek. So definitely go check that out. It's generally Thursdays, but I think in the coming weeks
that's gonna be amiable.
It'll be either Friday or Saturday as we try to get some more guests on to help their time change, if that makes any sense, or any hints
sure.
to who's coming up next.
I have one that I want to throw out there.
Okay, yeah, Bill, go ahead.
I don't think we haven't talked about this. Ready Room, not the podcast, which is also awesome. That drops maybe once or twice a year anymore.
Oh, right, yeah.
Not, but the Ready Room, the CBS All Access produced recap hosted by Will Wheaton of Card week to week. I don't know if you guys, Ian, Rob over there in the UK sector have access to that. I don't know if they put it on Amazon or what, or if you can see it on YouTube. But Will Wheaton, it's sort of like somewhat of a recap on his part. There's like always behind the scenes kind of features. They interview somebody. The first week it was Michael Chabon and Hanley Culpepper, who directed the first handful.
Yep. This
week it was Akiva Goldsman.
Yep.
So it's I think we've had like different versions of this after Trek for Discovery. The first season was hosted by Bennett Myra.
Yeah.
The second was hosted by somebody I don't know her name. But this to me is clearly like the best version of that.
Yes.
So far, kind of third time's a charm. They got a great host who fits and knows what he's talking about. Like. Very comfortable in that space, and I think the content's been really good. So, really, really enjoying that, and I'll be watching that every week.
Yeah, I hope that that kind of setup is here to stay, because I think it's definitely the best out of the three.
The best iteration for sure. They do get access. Ian watched it through Facebook, and Rob's seen the first one, hasn't seen the second one yet. Highly recommend the second one. There's some really cool. Behind the scenes stuff about the Borg set and where the Borg are in the show. There's some interesting little tidbits if you listen to what they're saying that might get your brain churning a little bit about where the show might be going.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah. If there isn't anything else, I'll wrap up the show. You guys know the drill. The discussion does not stop here. Come over to Facebook. The best way is probably Twitter and Discord.
Yeah.
Although we had issues with Discord today, that's probably the best way to kind of keep the discussion going. And we've got such a good group on there, so definitely come check it out.
Yeah, definitely agree. Discord, like I always say, if you're watching this on playback and you're intrigued by the idea of joining our Discord server, you can DM me at TrekFan4387. My DMs are open, and just let me know. Hey, I watched your show. I watched Trek Live. Join the Trek Live Discord server. I will get you in. It's a piece of cake. It's easy, and my watch is talking.
Apple Watch.
We'll make that happen.
Yep. Shout out to Rob and Ian for coming in. This is for helping lead the discussion. This has been episode 115. We'll see you guys next week with, again, core setting on Thursday, and then another Trek Live episode 116, topic to be determined. But we'll see you guys next week.
Hopefully next week you'll see me.
Yes,
Maybe.
Hopefully.